When we can manage our emotions, when we understand, the interplay between our thoughts, emotions, and the world around us, then we really have like the tools and skills that we need to manage the rest of it, to live a healthy life, to have great relationships, to achieve bigger goals. I'm really a proponent of looking beyond health and wellness as beyond just the absence of illness, right? We all certainly want to be without any kind of medical illness if we can help it, or at least manage and treat it as best as we can. But I think there's another layer to it, where after kind of achieving baseline health, that we are actually intentionally trying to thrive in multiple areas of our life. And I think when we do that, our health follows suit.
Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here for this new episode. Today, we're talking about emotional wellness, which is one of our main pillars that we talk about, and something that I think is absolutely massive. So I am so excited to dig into this today, and really excited for our guest. I have with me Dr. Jeannie Lawrence. And Dr. Lawrence is a psychiatrist and psychotherapist, and offers a coaching program, and really is sort of, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Lawrence, but you're really addressing emotional wellness from every angle. Maybe let's start first. Will you tell us a little bit about your background and what you do?
Yeah. Thank you for the introduction and for having me. First of all, I'm really excited to have the conversation. Like you said, I'm a board certified psychiatrist. I'm also a psychotherapist, and I have a coaching practice as well for women's physicians specifically. And my aim with all of that is to really break down barriers between women physicians and the support that I think we need and deserve to live lives that are not only successful on the outside, but also feel amazing on the inside. You asked a bit about my background. I went to medical school in South Carolina at the Medical University of South Carolina. I did my residency training at UNC Chapel Hill. I've sought additional certification in psychotherapy after residency training. And here I am with a new private practice and ready and really happy to serve my community, which is women physicians. I really got started on this path after just kind of noticing some alarming trends. We know that physicians suffer from rates of suicide that are a lot higher than the general public, and women physicians even higher than male physicians. Some sources cite that women physicians die by suicide at 130%.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, at a rate of 130% higher than the general public. And so it's not something that I think is getting enough attention. And I think it really speaks to the culture of silence around mental health and emotional health issues in our community. There's a lot of stigma. There's not a lot of space for us to openly talk about how we're feeling as women and women who are trying to balance a professional career in medicine with home life and all that comes with that. And so I'm really on this mission to try to break down those barriers and make support for women really accessible, really approachable. And that's why I like the combination of coaching along with my clinical practice. So.
Absolutely. So important, especially as a female physician. Thank you for that, because we do all need it. And I think it's a really great way to get started. I want to start by saying, how do you approach emotional wellness in the bigger context of wellness in general? I define wellness in general as living an intentional life that's our best and most meaningful life. So if we think of that from an emotional wellness perspective, how does that contribute to the big picture?
Yeah, I really think that emotional health and wellness is health. I think it's the foundation for everything that we do. And I like your definition. I think emotional wellness is being intentional about the way we think and live. And I think that when we can manage our emotions, when we understand, the interplay between our thoughts, emotions, and the world around us, then we really have the tools and skills that we need to manage the rest of it, to live a healthy life, to have great relationships, to achieve bigger goals. I'm really a proponent of looking beyond health and wellness as beyond just the absence of illness, right? We all certainly want to be without any kind of, medical illness if we can help it, or at least manage and treat it as best as we can. But I think there's another layer to it, where after kind of achieving baseline health, that we are actually intentionally trying to thrive in multiple areas of our life. And I think when we do that, our health follows suit. So
absolutely. Absolutely. We work on ourselves first, our inner selves, and the whole world sort of, I feel like, opens up to us at that point. I love that. So I'm going to dig right in here, because I have worked with women for a long time, and I've talked to a lot of women, and I feel like there are a couple big issues that tend to come up. And one of those that I feel like really gets in the way of our emotional well-being is this idea of perfectionism. So I don't know women more than men. I don't really know very much about men, so I can't really comment on in the general population, but in women in general, I think that we hold ourselves to this standard of perfection. And it can be really difficult for women who cling to this idea of perfectionism to let go of some of these thought principles, to rather embrace some of these thought principles, because it doesn't seem to mesh with where they're coming from, I have to be perfect. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. I think perfectionism is, like you said, one of those things that a lot of women relate to, especially, high achieving professional women physicians. Probably all of us kind of are ingrained with this idea and sense that, like you said, things have to be perfect. And I think when, speaking for myself, I think as a younger person, perfectionism was kind of like this celebrated thing. I don't know if, maybe I'm aging myself in talking about like a time when, perfectionism was really celebrated, but I think I certainly grew up in an environment where making perfect grades and being on perfect behavior, et cetera, was something that was expected and celebrated. And I think when we then go into certain careers like medicine, for example, in any kind of professional career, perfectionism can then become the standard. It's expected, and to a certain extent, certainly when you're dealing with human life, we have to, be on our A game with our work, but it becomes a part of who we are. And we lose touch with the fact that actually, as high achieving or whatever as we might be, we're actually just human beings, and human beings make mistakes. Human beings are not perfect. And I think with time, trying to chase down perfection, which of course is an unattainable ideal, it's easy to see how that can lead to a lot of negative self-image when we fail to reach that ideal. And so I think at a certain point, we have to kind of look at where that comes from, and then start taking some steps to disentangle our identity as a person from this ideal that we need to be perfect. I think without disentangling the two, we kind of set ourselves up for just constant, self-deprecation and feeling badly about ourselves when things go wrong, as they, of course, will, because this is a human life. So, yeah. Absolutely.
I love that idea of disentanglement, because that is exactly what happens is, I think when we strive for perfectionism, and I would say I'm a recovering perfectionist in some ways, but when we cling to the idea of perfectionism, I think there can be some misunderstanding that we shouldn't strive then. We should just let it all go. And that's not true either. That would be the other end of the coin, right? I think it's okay to strive. And I think it's okay to want things to be really great, and even to want them to be perfect would be okay. But I think where it becomes a problem is we do attach our worth to not hitting that perfection. And then we're guaranteeing ourselves to fail. And so it's exactly what you said, to disentangle that and say, okay, I am striving for this. I want this really great thing in my life, and I'm going to work really hard to have it be as good as possible. But even if I don't achieve that, when I don't achieve that, I still have value and I still have worth. Is that how do you help someone kind of cross that bridge to say, but I still want it to be perfect, and I still feel like I'm not as good of a person if I didn't do it perfectly?
Yeah, it takes some work. I think therapy can be very helpful with that, because it's a place where you can kind of safely explore where that's coming from. Like I alluded to earlier, I think a lot of us are getting these messages even from childhood about our value being tied to how well we do things and how perfectly we do things. And it may be something that you don't recognize. You don't recognize that connection as an adult. And so I think working with somebody to uncover where that's coming from can be a good first step if it's causing a problem in your life now. But, looking forward, when you have a belief system around perfectionism that's impacting the way that you're interacting with the world and doing things, it's really going to require a shift in your belief around your self-worth, right? It's really going to require that you understand that you are, as a human being, have intrinsic value. And that can take some work. That can take some time because that's not the message we always get. I love what you said earlier, that you feel like a recovering perfectionist, because I feel the same way. A new thought that I had to adopt that has been helpful. You were talking about striving, and I agree that, having goals gives us purpose, gives us direction. There's nothing wrong with striving to achieve or accomplish something, but I no longer am seeking to be perfect. I'm trying to be excellent. And that's something I learned from my business coach, but it's essentially our goal is not to be perfect. It's to be excellent. And excellent is defined as doing the best we can with what we have right now. And I think that's an attainable goal, and something that we don't have to necessarily attach our worth either. We're just doing the best that we can with what we have right now. And so
I love that. Yeah, I love that, because perfectionism is so rigid. If we say it has to be perfect, it's so rigid, and it can only mean one thing. Like, it can only mean flawless. But if you say excellence, you can, it's so much more fluid. It's so much more, you get to interpret that. Like, is that the best you had? Did you show up and provide some excellent service or do the work in an excellent fashion? And you can be happy with that and feel comfortable with that. I love that.
Absolutely.
Well, so that segues really nicely into this idea of self-worth. So one of the things I talk about a lot in wellness coaching is self-compassion and self-love, and how it really is at the root of it all, right? If you can't give yourself space to love yourself, then it's really hard to change your thought process to do anything else. Because if you don't love yourself, if you don't think you're worth saving, how would you even build a structure of wellness? Like, how would you lose weight if you don't value yourself? How would you give yourself the nutrients that you need if you don't value yourself? How do you take good care of your kids if you don't value yourself? So how do you approach women who really come to you saying, I'm not worth it? I'm not worthy. I know there's lots of people who are, and I know that those people should have compassion for themselves, but I don't have any worth. I'm not worth it.
Yeah. That's a tough situation. It breaks my heart when I see folks come to me with that belief system, because you can imagine there's a lot of pain that comes along with the thought that I'm not worth it and I'm not worthy. My process is to first listen and to be there and share that space with them non-judgmentally. I don't think it helps, in the beginning to try to fight that thought, that it's a deep seated core belief that has been fed, probably for a really long time. And so trying to put myself into their shoes and help them see that it's safe to feel that way for now is a good first step. Then we kind of move into deciding, like, is this something I want to even change? So I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but when folks come to me with a certain belief that is painful, or a situation that's painful, whatever it is, it might seem obvious or that they want to change, but there's actually good reasons that people feel the way they do. And so I like to spend some time like looking at why they feel unworthy and what benefit that feeling or that thought is providing for them. A lot of times, it points to important experiences in their life. And sometimes it can point to what they value. And so kind of teasing that apart and pointing out the values and the good things that we can see in the way that they're thinking now can make it easier to separate from those things down the road if they want to. It's really about starting from a place of self-acceptance and self-compassion, if I explain that in a clear enough way. And then from there we can do work. So I hope that made sense.
Totally.
Okay.
No, I totally get it. And I loved what you said, because the idea of just first establishing what do we want and why we're feeling certain ways is hugely important, because I think that number one, you said several things in there that I want to maybe generalize the concept that this isn't just people who come in saying, I have no self-worth, but anyone who comes in saying, I'm in pain, I'm hurting, I'm sad, there's something here that's feeling oppressive to me. I think that first you did just what you said, which is you said that must hurt. That must be really painful for you, and put a label on it and validated, that emotional experience. But then moving through to say, what do you want? Do you want to feel better? Because if you don't, no one can make you. And that's true for, I think, little things that we're all dealing with too, emotionally. If I get angry at the driver next to me and flip them off, is that what you'd like to do? Okay, then great, stay with it. If it's serving you well, like go for it. But if that's not who you want to be, then let's talk about that. And we get to make these little judgment calls all day, every day with our life decisions and with our life interactions. Is this who you want to be? And if not, I can help you. I can help you with the thought work and dig in there. But if you don't want to be anyone different, then embrace that, right? And let it go. So I love what you had to say. I think that's really important. Now, if we're moving forward, one of the things that I love that you talked about was the idea of pain, and someone comes in and says, I'm hurting, or something is causing me to feel angry or to feel pain or whatever. And I think that the idea of pain can be, or really any emotion can be difficult to deal with. And what I mean by that is we feel an emotion, and how do we process it? I think we can suppress it or say like, oh, don't feel that way. You shouldn't feel that way. Like, feel happy. Don't feel sad. Like, we can suppress, or we can cling on to it, and we can make that part of who we are so that we're making decisions based on that emotion of anger or sadness or hurt and pain. What's the middle ground there? How does someone feel an emotion and give credit to that emotion and let that emotion be part of them so they're not suppressing it, but then let it move all the way through them? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's a good question for sure. I think it starts with putting a label on our emotions and understanding them for what they are. So we kind of conceptualize emotions sometimes as, and pain sometimes as this thing that is so aversive that we have to flee from it. We either have to suppress it, we have to do something with it in that moment, or we have to obey it if it's like an emotion like anger or something like that. In reality, emotions, they're valid, they're important, they're ours, they're part of our human experience, but they don't have to necessarily be this thing that controls our lives. So I like to help people take the power out of strong emotions sometimes. And that process starts with identifying, putting a label to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is how I'm feeling, understanding what that feeling is, and then identifying how it feels in the body. So if it is pain, if it is like heartbreak or something like that, like imagining how it feels in very concrete terms and where you feel it in your body, writing that down sometimes can take some of it acknowledges it, but it takes some of the power away from it. Like, this is a sting in my chest. This is a tickle in my stomach. And writing that down again can give it some perspective. It's not this force that has to crush us necessarily.
I love
so
that.
We acknowledge that, we give it words, and then we take away a little bit of its power over us. And then we can decide what to do with it. We can let it pass. We can do some thought work to reduce it. We can accept it and keep it moving so that it doesn't, necessarily dictate how we live our lives. We have some choices then when it's not this thing that we are powerless to.
Well, and I think labeling it is so important, because then we can decide. We don't say, I am pain, or we do say I am sad, but that doesn't help us very much. I think by labeling it and saying, I am feeling sadness, I am feeling pain, I am feeling anger. Well, okay, I feel lots of things. There's lots of different parts to me. And I think it gives our brain that just quick second to say, oh, wait, you mean this isn't the whole of who you are? Oh, okay, cool. I can deal with that. Yeah. So to label it, and I love the idea of writing it out. I think there's something about that kinetic motion too, of actually forcing yourself to write it down. I think that does help it kind of move through us. And you also mentioned then we can decide what to do with it. So this is something that has come up with my coaching, is because people will say like, well, I can't just let the emotion go. Well, you can, you get to decide what to do with it. And I think sometimes we feel like we have to suffer. We have to kind of keep these emotions in us, but we don't. We can choose to let them go, or we can choose to do something. And sometimes if something makes us angry, we choose to stand up and say, I'm not going to let you treat me like that. And sometimes if something makes us angry, we decide, I don't care. I'm just going to let that one go because I'd rather be happy and I'd rather, go on my merry way and do whatever I had planned for today.
Yeah.
But we have to separate it from ourselves first so that we can even have a chance to think about what to do with it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree 100% about what you said there, making that separation between us as a person and how we're feeling. And the same goes for our thoughts too, right? Us as a person and the thoughts that we think. We talked about it earlier in the perfectionism and the failures that we're inevitably going to have, and then who we are as a person. There has to be this understanding that we are not our thoughts, our feelings, or the things that happen to us. We are who we are, and we're whole and we're lovable,
and that's okay.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Where do we even start? If you're saying you're meeting with someone brand new and they're saying, I want to develop my emotional wellness, I want to get a little more well. Now, this is oversimplified because I think from my perspective, it's a big part of meeting someone where they're at and moving forward from there. But do you have thoughts about things that are pretty generalizable? Having met with so many patients over the years, things that sort of we all need to start doing. I think labeling the emotions is a huge one. Get those emotions out of you, separate yourself, allow yourself to respond how you want. Are there other general principles that you think of that are sort of those, what you would say are emotional wellness, big points?
Yes. Let's see. So you kind of asked two questions. It sounded like about my, what I might do with somebody who was coming to me initially, asking for some help with their wellness and for, general principles. So I usually would start, I start with a thorough conversation, of course, to kind of tease all of that out. We feel the way we feel. We're kind of living our lives and having our experiences. And sometimes being the person being ourselves and being in our situations and in our lives and feelings, it's hard to see objectively what's going on. And so I think a conversation with an objective outside person can be helpful to kind of see, to give some perspective, I guess, to what we're experiencing. But general wellness principles, I love the idea of growing an understanding of our thoughts and their ties to our emotions, for sure. I think that really is the starting point and the key to it all.
Will you explain that a little bit? The idea of like helping your thoughts, how your thoughts are related to emotions.
Yeah. So I think most of us, I think before we get some kind of training around this, are living our lives on autopilot, right? Like our lives are happening to us. We don't have control over the things that happen to us, and that's just how we see the world. Unfortunately, that's kind of a disempowering perspective. And in reality, even though there are things that happen outside of us that we certainly can't control, we do have there's a space between the things that happen and our emotional reaction to it, our thoughts. And our thoughts are where we can, exercise some agency. And I think when you understand that connection, that it's not the events of our lives that cause our results in our emotions, but it's really the way we think about it, then you have some power. Now you have something that you can do. Now you can start to dictate your own results in your own life. And that that can feel really, really good. So that's what I meant by that. I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand that. And I think feeling powerless in our situations is what causes a lot of emotional suffering. And so taking back that power by understanding that link, I think is the jump off for sure. Beyond that, I mean, I talk a lot about lifestyle and how that can impact our emotional wellness as well. And, things like getting 7 or 8 hours of sleep a night and following a reasonably healthy diet and avoiding substances like alcohol and tobacco and exercising on a regular basis. seem mundane. They're the things that we hear all the time. But when those things aren't in place, our brains and bodies obviously aren't functioning at their peak level. We don't have the capacity to access that thought process that I just talked about, and we're less able to kind of manage and exert power in our lives. So lifestyle, understanding thoughts and emotions are two big parts. I guess third and fourth might be relationships, and then values and things like that. I think our relationships are such a huge integral part of our experience as human beings. And you don't have to have tons of friends and family, but we do need to have a few supportive relationships. I mean, and so I think learning tools and skills to not only socially connect with other people, but also the tools and skills that you need to repair when there is conflict. The inevitable conflict that's going to come in those close relationships is a really important pillar to emotional wellness. It again gives you back some power because you can be in relationship with someone, experience the ups and downs, and know that it's not going to all come crashing down because you've got those skills. Values and spirituality, I think, are really important as guiding principles. And I think being in touch with those things can be huge motivators when we're doing the work to feel better, and can make sure that we are in alignment so that as we strive for goals, emotional wellness goals, and whatever goals we have, we're not burning ourselves out in the process, and we're not getting to the finish line feeling unfulfilled. We're getting to the finish line and feeling like, I've done something that I'm really proud of and that aligns with who I really am on the inside. So,
yeah, man, such good things in there. I think that last one, I mean, if you don't know where you're going, then how do you create an action plan that gets you to where you're going? Like then you're just creating random things together. So that value system is something that is so important and easy, honestly, easy to kind of forget about, because like you said earlier, we're all busy. Like we're all just going with the flow. Most of us are living reactively. So things happen to us and we just go with it. But to take that power back enough to say, I want to do things differently. Like that's so doable, but you set the value system first so that you know even what you're trying to do. So yeah, huge things. So one other thing I wanted to talk about is when you talk about thoughts, I think that one of the things that a lot of people struggle with changing their thoughts, so we educate women and we say, you have control here. You don't have to just react all the time. Like you can create space between your thoughts and then decide where you want to take them. And once women know that, I think sometimes it's still so hard to turn off our brains. So we have these thoughts that are going nonstop, these negative thoughts that are there all the time. What is something that we can do to help when the negative thoughts just come so automatically?
Yeah. I think first is understanding that human brains have human thoughts, and sometimes they're going to be negative. I think seems obvious, but it's not. Like sometimes I think we beat ourselves up basically when we start experiencing negative thoughts because we think they're not supposed to be there, when in reality, we are going to have negative thoughts because we're human beings. So understanding that first, like there's nothing wrong with you because you're having negative thoughts. That being said, I mean, sometimes it can get exhausting, right? Like having them and then fighting them. And I think the exhaustion comes with the resistance to them sometimes, right? And again, that judgment that there's something wrong or bad about me for having them. So dropping that resistance can help to allow them kind of to pass as they do without wearing ourselves out and beating ourselves up about it. To go a step further, I take your point that, sometimes we want to do something about it, right? We don't want to have negative thoughts all day, every day. I think things like developing a mindfulness practice can be extremely helpful in managing thoughts and allowing them to pass through us without judgment, so that they're not causing stress and causing us to feel poorly. So that's one of my go-to ways is like a mindful meditation or whatever Absolutely. Way you want to add mindfulness into your daily life. It just can slow those thoughts down, but also help us pass the judgment part of it so that they're less distressing, which I think is really important.
Yeah, I love that you say that it's okay to have some negative thoughts, because it is so funny. And an example of my perfectionism is like, oh, okay, so I'm not supposed to have negative thoughts. Okay, I'm going to take notes. You tell me how I get rid of those negative thoughts, and then I'll judge myself when I fail, right? Like, so it's sort of creating the same process of, oh, now I'm having a negative thought about the fact that I'm having negative thoughts, and I'm never going to make it. So I love that you said first, just accept that your brain is going to start wherever it is. It's going to think things. And that doesn't mean that we've failed because thoughts come to our brain. I've heard it said, the important part of is learning that we don't have to believe everything that pops into our brain. And I think that's awesome to say like, oh, a negative thought. Okay, interesting. I'm going to have other thoughts now. So just accepting that is huge. So I love that.
Yeah.
Will you tell us from your perspective, this is something that I connect to negative thoughts, but maybe it's not the perfect connection, is this idea of thought distortions. And that may be a term that a lot of people aren't familiar with, but can you explain those a little bit and how you found that identifying those thought distortions can be helpful to people? I know this is going a little bit deep, so we won't go too far down this road, but I do think the principle is hugely important.
Yeah. So thought distortions or cognitive distortions. I first want to start by saying I think it's a little bit of a misnomer because the word distortion kind of makes people assume that if you experience this, that again, there's something wrong or abnormal about you.
Totally.
When in reality, thought distortions are incredibly common. Every single one of us has them. And it's just the kind of exaggerated way that human beings tend to look at certain situations. And we all experience them. We may be more prone to certain categories of them, just kind of based on who we are and our upbringing and things like that. But it's the way that we filter the things that happen in the world in a way that might not be totally real or totally helpful to us, basically. So examples are like catastrophizing, for example. If you're the kind of person that one thing happens and you're immediately thinking of all of the worst case scenarios that might happen.
I am
and you
that
go
person.
down a rabbit hole. Yeah, me too. You go down that rabbit hole instead of taking a step back and realizing that those worst case scenarios are much less likely than a better case scenario. Then you might be prone to catastrophizing. And I think that's okay. But it is helpful to identify that, to put a label on it, and to recognize that there are some other ways to look and filter the world that might be more helpful to you. And I mean, that's just one example. There's all or nothing thinking and fortune telling and predicting the future and all kinds of things that again, we all do. I think it is helpful though to understand the most common ones and to get in the habit of identifying when we are experiencing them, because, not to make light of them at all, they certainly, those thought distortions can certainly cause us a lot of unnecessary emotional pain. And so that's really the point in understanding them. That way we have that opportunity to make a different choice, to look at something through a different lens that serves us a little better.
And do people tend to stick with a few thought distortions? Like as we're growing up, do we tend to have one or two or three that are most typical for us, or are we sort of all over the map?
I think that's one thing that kind of differentiates us, that we do have like our little set of commonly our go-to thought distortions. I really do see that a lot, for my anxious folks who are kind of always catastrophizing or commonly catastrophizing or whatever the case may be. I do think people tend to go to the same kinds of distortions, habitually. So.
And I love thinking about thought distortions. I suffered from depression when I was younger. And going to therapy at that point and learning about these distortions was like a massive eye opener for me, because it was the first time that someone told me, you might not be perceiving the world in a completely accurate way. And I was just like, what do you mean? You mean the way that I see the world is not the way that everyone else sees the world? And this was really mind blowing for me when I was younger. But it's by identifying the ways that we can distort our view of the world, that then we can take back that power and we can say, I don't have to react to that because that's a distorted view. I can react to reality the way that I want to. So I think of an example of, I've I see examples of this all the time, as I'm sure you do. Once you kind of know what they are, you see them everywhere. But I think a lot of people, and I don't know which distortion this is, you can tell me, the idea of when we read other people's minds. So like I, with my husband, say, well, he did this, and that means all these things about him. So I think if we can recognize that, for that example, if we can recognize that we are reading so much into people that may not be true, that we can then actually say, oh, what do I know about this person? What could this mean about this person? And then we take back the power. So it's not a guilt trip. It's not that we should say like, you're seeing through a thought distortion and you should feel bad about that because you're not giving them the space. The power here is that if we recognize that we're seeing things through a distorted perspective, that we can take those lenses off that we're viewing the world through and be empowered to make decisions along our own set of values instead of our distorted perspective. So yeah, thank you.
I totally agree. I don't think I could say it any better. You asked what that was called, and I call it mind reading or fortune telling. And it does lead to lots of assumptions and then conflict between people that doesn't need to be there. And so
much pain.
I agree. Yeah. Understanding what it is, recognize it in yourself gives you that power to feel better and get along better and really give people the benefit of the doubt. And I wish we all did it. I wish it was something that was taught in school. I think the world would be a little bit calmer, happier place.
Absolutely. And to use that example of that distortion a little bit in terms of how it can harm us, if we make assumptions about what other people are thinking, then we can think, well, they didn't do that because they don't love me. And that causes us pain. Well, what if you're wrong? What if that perspective is distorted? You mean they do love me and they made a mistake? Like they did something stupid and they still love me? Like that is a way happier way to live life. And if we recognize that we're distorting, then we can do that.
Yeah.
Now, tell me, is there a reference? Like, I think that if people want to learn more about distortion, certainly therapy is a great place to explore that. Is there a source that you like online or a book that people can just start to say like, oh, I wonder what distortions I use, because we all use them. Yeah. Is there a good book that you like or an online source that kind of can help people see those?
Yeah, I will throw out a book called Feeling Good by David Burns. He's a psychiatrist who developed a specific kind of cognitive behavioral therapy. And so all of his work is based on understanding cognitive distortions and a lot of the other stuff that we talked about. But any of his books will have, charts and help you gain some understanding around the most common kinds of thought distortions. A simple Google search will do as well. Cognitive distortions are, something that is well defined and talked about a lot all over the internet. So yeah,
that's awesome. I think that's such a great place for people to start with thought work. Is that too intense to start with, or is that a reasonable place to start, do you think?
I think understanding cognitive distortions is actually a good place to start. I think awesome. It is. Yeah.
I've read Feeling Good and it's not very long. It's not like a deep, intense, super intense read. Like I think it's pretty doable, right?
Yeah. I agree.
Awesome. Well, do you have any other points that you want to make in terms of just if someone comes to you and says emotional wellness, tell me your deepest, darkest thoughts, not darkest, lightest.
I think we covered a lot. I mean, this has been an amazing conversation. I think the most important thing is that if you are looking to improve your emotional wellness, to, raise your hand and get the support that you need to do that. I think a lot of times we try to go it alone and we don't have that objective, supportive outside person to, help us put things into perspective and give the support that we need to actually make strides towards more wellness. And so I think that the takeaway is just being willing to say, I'd like some help with this and willing to partner with somebody on that journey.
Yeah. Dr. Lawrence, thank you so much for being with us. It's been so enjoyable to talk with you. Do you want to share where people can find you, especially those female physicians who may be looking for some of this coaching?
Yeah. So you can find me at my website. It's www.jeannielawrencemd.com. My name is spelled JeANNIE, last name Lawrence, LAWRENCEMD.com. And there you can find all about my clinical services as well as my coaching program. And I am happy to help.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, and come back next time for another episode. And remember, this information is for education only and not intended to be medical advice.